Alright, today we're going to be looking at the poem The Author to a Book by Anne Bradstreet, written in 1666, based on a true story actually. So what happened was in 1650, Anne's brother-in-law took this collection of poems, or we call it an anthology of poems, and without her consent or without her knowledge either, and went to go and have this book published. And it was called The 10th Muse Lately Sprung Up in America, and she was very upset about it. And so 1666, 16 years later, she writes this poem which is based on this story that and then the poem's content narrative is about somebody who has a book published without her knowledge and by her friends. And we see a lot of personification and metaphors, a lot of figurative language used in this poem, because although her friends did it to help her, they thought to themselves, listen, she's never going to publish this book because she's always going to think that it's not good enough, it's not ready yet. But we think that, let's get her name out there, and so let's publish it. But of course she felt like, well, I wasn't ready, I didn't feel happy enough with what I'd written yet. It wasn't ready for prowling eyes to see. And so now she's got to try and look at this book now that it's published and try and fix it and stuff, and she can't. And ultimately she says, because the book is personified as her child, because it's her creation. And she says, well, to the child, please just, stay out of sight of the critics and people who have a lot of knowledge about poetry or educated in that, because they're going to see my writing, they're going to tear it to pieces, they're going to say it's horrible and it's a reflection of me. Okay, so let's have a little look at the poem. Yes, it's written in rhyming couplets, which is nice. You kind of got a Dr. Seuss feel to it. It's also written in iambic pentameter. And you'll remember that pent means 5, meter is the rhythm, so that every line has 10 syllables, 5 stressed, 5 unstressed. Okay, we start off with an apostrophe, and that's not the punctuation mark, that is actually a figure of speech. An apostrophe is when you address somebody or something that's not able to respond. So if the person is dead and you're talking to them, that's an apostrophe. Theoretically, although this can be argued, but when you pray, that's also an apostrophe, because there's no physical person that we can see that's able to respond. Alright, so she's now talking to a book, and she refers to that as her offspring, obviously her child. And we say that this is a metaphor because a book is being compared to a child that she's given birth to, which is obviously not possible. Alright, and there's also a personification going here, because she's talking to the book as if the book has the ability to listen and hear and take instruction, etc. So let's have a look. Thou ill-formed offspring. Ill-formed. It's not well-formed at all. So we've got to constantly keep in mind this comparison between a child, a baby or whatever, a human being, and a book. Alright, so if it's an ill-formed child, it means the child is all, things haven't formed properly in the womb, and that, and this book is not very good, and if you look at all the writing, it doesn't work so nicely. So the book is ill-formed, and it's my feeble brain, because I'm the one, it's my brain that created those poems in the book. Right? So if my brain is feeble, it means that, well, my brain is obviously not very good. Now, of course, she's going to be quite critical of herself, because we always are worst critics. Who after birth didst by my side remain. Okay, so after I'd written this book, or all these poems, right, this anthology, it hadn't been published yet, I kept it. So after birth, after I created it, did by my side remain, I kept it, even though I knew it was not very good, according to her anyway. Okay? Till snatched. If you snatch something, in this case you steal it, alright? So it was stolen from by my side, by my friends, who were less wise than true. They weren't very wise, but they were true. So they were true friends. In other words, they were trying to help me out. They were looking out for me, but they weren't very wise because they acted stupidly. They shouldn't have done it. They don't realize how important it is for me to have those poems right before they get published. Okay? Who the standing for the book, abroad, went all over and was exposed to public view. So in the actual situation with Anne Bradstreet, I believe it went to London to get published. But this book is now gone, and it's been exposed for everybody to look at. Made thee in rags, halting to the press to trudge, where errors were not lessened, all may judge. Okay, so we've got personification going on here. Human characteristics given to an inanimate object. If you are dressed in rags, it's untidy, it's torn, it's ripped, it's not very good looking. So she's saying that was like my rough work that they took. It wasn't finalized, okay, and it halted to the press, to the printers, to get published. It trudged there. Trudge means to walk slowly with heavy steps. So it's like the book didn't go there willingly. It was forced to go there. And it was there at the printing press where all these errors that were in my writing, and we don't know exactly what errors they were. I mean, was it that it didn't rhyme like she wanted? Was it that the word usage, the diction wasn't very good? Was it that the iambic pentameter wasn't right? I don't know, okay? But all these errors, they're not going to be fixed. You send anything to the printers, they will print exactly what you give them. They're not going to fix them for you. And it was there that everybody could judge your jeepers. Look at this writing, it's horrible. And then, of course, whatever the writing is, they're going to trace back to who's the author, who wrote this stuff. This obviously going to be embarrassed by that. All may judge. At thy return, my blushing was not small. So when it returned, when this book was published and it came into my hands, my blushing was not small. I was embarrassed. The blushing part is embarrassed. Now we've got litotes in this line. Litotes is a figure of speech which uses an opposite and a negative to create a positive. So, was not small. Her blushing was big, right? So, in order to get to big, I've used an opposite of big, which is small, and I've used the negative, not. So, not small, in other words, big. Okay, so that's litotes, opposite, negative to create a positive. My rambling brat in print should mother call. Remember, we've still got this continuation, this extended metaphor of a book being compared to a child. And a rambling brat. Now, a brat is a spoilt child, okay? Rambling, if you ramble, it means incoherent, it's confused, you're going on and on, right? So this book is going on and on because it's quite long, all these poems in it, right? And it's in print. And it's going to call me mother because I wrote it. My name is on the book, you see. I cast thee by as one unfit for light. I hide it, Like, I don't want anybody to see it. It's not exactly a coffee table book. I'm not going to put it on my coffee table for everybody to see. I'm going to, put it in the basement. Like, you think about those movies where, they have retarded children, or if you go into the horror kind of scene and you get, I can't remember the name now. Is it Jason Voorhees? I'm not sure it's Friday the 13th, or whether it is, I think it's Friday the 13th, where you have somebody who is so ugly, grotesque, that you lock them in the basement. Okay? And, there, I've actually put it there, like a monster kept in the basement. Thy visage, a visage is a face, okay? Your face was so irksome, it was so ugly when I looked at it. When I looked at this book, I could barely look at you, You were so ugly. Yet, so in other words, but, being mine own, at length affection would thy blemishes amend, if so I could. Okay, but because you are my child, we always say that a mother will love her child no matter what. Okay, so she's saying, like, because you are my child, I would, out of affection, if I could, try and fix all these flaws that I see. Okay, let's move this page up a bit. I washed thy face. So, like, this is what I did. Okay, I'm trying to fix now because it's mine, because of the affection. This is what I tried to do. I washed thy face, linking in with the fact that if you had a child that was dirty, you would wash its face literally. But of course, this is a book, so she's not exactly going to wash the book. She's going to say, like, I tried to correct the mistakes. Okay, rubbing off a spot, rubbing out things, editing. Okay, all types of metaphors for rewriting. But it's a problem because even though she tried to fix it, she saw more defects, more errors, still made a flaw. So maybe she fixed one aspect but didn't fix the other. So maybe she changed the word to a better word, but it no longer rhymed, or the meter was wrong. I stretched thy joints to make thee even feet, yet still thou runnest more hobbling than is meet. Very well written poetry here. Okay, let me explain. So earlier on I spoke about it being written in iambic pentameter, and meter refers to the beat, or what we call feet. Alright, so in other words, you're going to have stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed syllables, and we call those syllables feet. So literally stretching thy feet. If you put him or her in the torture rack, you make a person longer, which was an ancient form of torture, ancient form of torturing device, to try and make the feet even, like one feet was longer than the other, which would go in nicely with the fact that it says it's ill-formed. Okay, but it also means that, well, metric feet, I tried to correct it so that it was written in iambic trimeter or pentameter or a tetrameter or whatever the hell it was supposed to be written in. Okay. Yet, again, that yet, but still thou runnest more hobbling than is meet. Meet in this case is what is required, what should be. So even though I did all these things, the metaphor there is that the poem didn't flow smoothly at all, because you actually are running with a limp. You're hobbling along. It's not smooth. You didn't run or walk smoothly at all. So the mistakes remain. Continuing this trying to correct story, in better dress to trim thee was my mind, but naught save homespun cloth in the house I find. So I wanted to make you look better by decorating you. That trim there is decorate. Was my mind. That was my intention, to make you look better. But unfortunately, in my house, in other words, in my brain, because remember, she's the creator of these poems. So in my brain, unfortunately, all I could find was homespun cloth, which is not very fancy at all. Homespun cloth. Cloth is not exactly something you wear. Cloth is something that you use to polish the car or wipe the counter. Okay, so she's being very critical of herself and saying everything that was in my brain, my abilities, I couldn't make the anthology any better. In this array amongst vulgars mayst thou roam. In critics' hands beware thou dost not come. Okay, so dressed this way, in this array, it's better that you go roaming around rough people, vulgars. Okay, go amongst people who don't know any better, who don't know poetry well at all, because they won't be able to tell that it's not well written. That's where you should go. She's talking to the child / the book. And make sure that you stay far away from critics. Don't come near them, because they will tear you and me to pieces. And take thy way where yet thou art not known. Go where you are not known. You know, it's like somebody who's done something terrible or ruined their reputation or whatever, and they will decide to move far, far away where nobody knows them. And that is what she's trying to say. Make sure that you stay out of sight. If for thy father asks, say, thou hadst none. If anybody asks you, who's your father? Because we all know who your mother is, right? Your mother is Anne Bradstreet. Her name is on the cover of this anthology. But if anybody asks you where your father is, say you didn't have a father. Now, why would you say that? Well, first of all, she's the one who wrote the book, right? She also doesn't want anybody else to take the blame. She wants to say, it's me, I'm responsible. Okay? And for thy mother, well, she alas is poor. So it's almost as if she's trying to say, you know, I had to print you. I had to have you published because I didn't have any money. I didn't have any money, and so I needed any money that I could get. And I couldn't wait to fix the poems. I had to send them out, which is obviously not true. But she's trying to make an excuse for the fact that this is why this book was published. Okay? It's like sending out a child and saying, I'm sorry, I can't afford to look after you anymore. Go out there, try and find somebody. And if somebody comes up to you and says, shame, you know, you're so poor, you don't have any clothes or food or anything, why not? You say, well, I'm afraid my mother was so poor and I didn't have a father. Which caused her thus to send thee out the door. It is her poorness, her lack of money, that caused her to send thee out the door. And we all know that that is not true, because we know that it was, in fact, her friends, less wise than true, who did it. But she is incredibly embarrassed about it. And so, as you can see in this poem, very nice poem, well written, a lot of figurative language, a lot of personification metaphor, extended metaphor throughout, and an overall an enjoyable poem to analyze, study,